Hi, I'm Emily Johnson, founder of Polaris Capital Advisors, and this is Money Matters, the show where we inspire your financial confidence. And as always, we get the inspiration for this show from you, our viewers, and from our clients. And this week, we found some inspiration, interestingly, from a call from a reporter, actually, who was asking information about divorce and finances. And I thought her questions were pretty interesting, so I thought I would share that same information with you. The first question that she had was, do you ever encounter financial bullying with divorce? And I thought that was interesting. She actually used the word financial abuse, which I think is a little bit more bullying. And the answer to that is yes, you do encounter financial bullying. I'm sure for those of you that have ever been through a divorce or involved in a divorce, bullying is sort of part and parcel of the situation. But from a financial perspective, that bullying can take a couple of different forms. The first one that I usually see has to do with the definition of marital assets and one party telling the other party that because they earn the funds that all of the assets in the marriage are theirs. When in reality, any assets that are acquired and accumulated during the period of the marriage are actually marital, regardless of who earns them and whose title they're in. So say, for example, you and your spouse are married and you use joint funds to purchase a home. Say the home is only in one spouse's name and the mortgage is only in one spouse's name. That is still a marital asset, regardless of the fact that it was actually purchased under one party's name. It's still a marital asset and thus divisible during a divorce. So that's one area that we see it. The only real separate assets when it comes to divorce are assets that were gifted to you that you then never titled in a joint title. So let's say mom passes away and leaves you $100,000 of stock. As long as that stock remains in your name only, then that stock is considered to be a separate asset. Therefore, it's off the table from any division during divorce. Another way that things would be separate is if it's premarital. So if you were married, if you were not married and you had a 401k that you earned prior to marriage, those funds are actually separate. Now, the growth on those during marriage could be included as a marital asset, but any assets that were acquired prior to marriage are considered a separate asset as long as you keep them in separate title. As soon as you commingle assets, meaning as soon as you take any asset and put it into joint title, if it's a separate asset that you then put into joint title, that asset is now a marital asset because it has been joined in title. So if you have a party, if you're going through a divorce, and if one party says to the other, this is all going to be mine, I'm the one that made all the money, which is something that sadly you do hear quite a bit, and it's sort of a bullying type tactic. If one party is saying that to the other, just know that in reality, any asset that is acquired and accumulated and grows during marriage is a marital asset, regardless of who earns the money and whose title it's in. So that was one answer to that question. The second part of that comes with disclosure. So sometimes we will see that one party or the other doesn't want to produce all of the necessary information. So let's say, for example, you had operating accounts that were joint, and then because of the separation, you now have two operating accounts. Well, technically, all of those assets are supposed to be disclosed. Sometimes, though, we'll have a party that doesn't want to disclose that new account. It might be because they're spending money on something they don't want the other to see. It might be because they don't feel that they should show them now that it's separate. It might be that they are trying to hide some assets, which is rare but does happen. So in that case, if you're the party that is asking for information, you might actually have to go through the full disclosure process involving obtaining an attorney, having that attorney send over that list, and get into the legal process of discovery. If possible, it's always helpful if both parties will offer full disclosure, but sometimes, whether it's just out of spite or because one party or the other is trying to hide assets, they won't produce all financial documents. So those are the two aspects of sort of financial bullying that we encounter most when we're looking at divorce situations. The first, again, being the statement that all assets are separate because they're earned separate, which is not the case, and the other being a disclosure issue. So that was her first question that I thought was really interesting. The second question that she had was around negotiations, financial negotiations in divorce. And I think her exact question was somewhere along the lines of, what types of tactics do you use when you're engaging in financial negotiations, or do you recommend to clients engaging in financial negotiations in divorce? The answer to that, sort of the simple answer to that, because of course every case is different, every scenario is different, but the simple answer to that is really to have the parties look at time period A, time period B, and time period C, because there's going to be a lot of transition that's occurring between separation, divorce, and life after divorce. So when you're looking at finances, there's only so much of that financial pie to go around. You have the one marital pie of assets, liabilities, cash flows to go around, and you're about to divide that one household into two. So what I find the best thing to do is to look at the overall expenses right now. So let's say that you have wife and children are going to remain in the marital home. Husband is going to go and obtain another residence. You're going to have X dollars in costs, and again, you have this one marital pie. How long is that going to last? Are you going to stay in that home until the kids graduate from high school? Are you going to stay there until the house sells? That's period A. So period A is the time that this is in negotiation, that you are perhaps separated and not yet divorced, and that's what the cost is going to be. So you might have settlement 1 that is for that time frame, just to address what that period is for the costs that are going to be there for that period. Period 2 might be post-divorce, where perhaps, again, you've both moved, you might still have the same residence, perhaps you have kids that are going to college or are still in college. That period is sort of another transitional period, but you might have separate costs. So you have the period that is separated but not yet divorced, then you have the period around the actual when the divorce occurs and right after the divorce. Again, not everything happens quickly. You might have to sell a residence, you might have to divide a 401k. These things all take time. So having those transition periods A and B are essential. The third time period that we look at is post-divorce. So this is really what most people are looking at, interestingly, because people want to get through their divorce so quickly. It's an unhappy process. It's never a positive situation, or I guess very rarely a positive situation. So they want to get right past it. So they're immediately looking at, okay, when I sign on the dotted line, I want to have X dollars in support. We should have Y dollars in child support. This is how the assets are going to be divided, and it's going to happen like that. That is never how it goes down. It is always a process. So time period A, again, transition period. Time period B, a transition period. Time period C is the moving forward. So even though clients want to look at that right out of the gate of what the settlement is going to look like and implement it immediately, rarely is that actually the best way to go for both parties, because you're going to engage in fights. There's going to be something that blows up that period C situation if you don't acknowledge the fact that you're going to have issues that need to be negotiated from the time that you're separated, during the divorce, to the time period that you actually get past that and can move on and you see a light at the end of the tunnel. So that's my biggest focus when we're looking at financial negotiations and divorce. Of course, disclosure is obviously the largest one, making sure that all assets and liabilities, income, expenses are actually disclosed. But we'll usually look at expenses from a time period A, time period B, and time period C perspective to make sure that we're addressing each of those time periods in a way that hopefully keeps people communicating and allows them to actually get to that period C that is the light at the end of the tunnel, with hopefully maintaining as much of that marital pie as possible. So those were the two questions that she had around this article relating to finances and divorce. We do get a lot of questions around this. Sometimes it's from individuals that are perhaps considering divorce and want to have an idea of what the financial picture might look like after divorce, and sometimes it's from individuals that are already actively engaged in a divorce, in which case what we're looking at really is two financial plans. It's not all that much different than actually financially putting together a financial plan for retirement for a couple. All you're doing is just overlaying two financial plans on this divorce, hopefully in a way that, again, maximizes that family pie, maximizes the funds that are available to that family for all of their goals, as if the partnership were to remain in place. So thank you very much. This has been Money Matters. Please join us again next week, and we discuss more things surrounding your money where it matters. Thank you.